Welcome to Let Them Eat Cardboard, where we have very serious discussions about very silly games. My name's David, and I'm here with my good buddy and co-host Mike.
Hi. Hello.
And this is the very first episode. We're going to talk about some of the games we've played recently, a feature game, which will be Brass, Birmingham, and Lancashire, and a topic of our gaming background and history and the types of games and designers we like, and go over a few news items at the end. So, Mike, what have you been playing lately?
Oh, geez. Not a lot this week, but we did get in. I got a little care package from Tom Russell at Hollandspiel, and I got to try Meltwater, which is their newest game. And I was really, really impressed. And I know you know the designer, right?
Yes, online friend.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really good. And we're kind of just getting into war games. We have pretty heavy Euro background. And this is great for, if you're kind of a war game novice like me. But I have heard that a lot of people are just really excited for it in general. It's really, really clever. Not a ton of rules overhead. It feels really claustrophobic and dark. Kind of everything you want from.
So, give the high level overview. What is the theme and the kind of mechanics that run the game?
Okay, so the theme is sometime before the Cold War ended, the war went hot, and the Earth was bathed in nuclear fire, and the only habitable place left is Antarctica. And so the U.S. and the Russians are down there trying to make a new life for themselves while also still killing each other. And the object of the game is to eliminate all of the other side. Civilians, soldiers, everything. Just complete extermination. In terms of mechanisms, you're looking at a lot of area influence. There's not a lot of actual combat, but as it would be in a post-nuclear world, radiation is everywhere, and radiation is slowly kind of closing in on where you're at. So every turn, the space where you can live is just getting smaller and smaller, and the enemies are getting closer and closer. And part of what you need to do is you need to push them where they can't live so that they just die of starvation or die of radiation poisoning or hypothermia or,
You're just trying to outlive the other side.
You're trying to outlive them, basically. There's not a ton of dice rolling combat, stuff like that. There's a little bit of combat, but it comes at a high price.
We mentioned before we were recording, it's kind of like the pollution in antiquity, but you said it's not, or it's more punishing.
I think it's more punishing because in antiquity, at least you can build on top of pollution in certain cases, and you can get rid of pollution in antiquity. Once that radiation starts coming, there's the clock is just ticking. You need to make things happen. You need to be really aware of what's going to happen at the end of your turn, at the end of your opponent's next turn. But overall, I think it's a very tactical experience. I'm still complete novice at it, but I'm really excited to explore the system more.
How long would you say it takes on average?
Oh God, so the first actual two-player game I played, it was quick because it was a surrender. My girlfriend and I played together, and she made a huge mistake early in her positioning, and she was never able to recover. But I would say, once I taught her the rules and we were going, I couldn't see it lasting more than 45 minutes. It's a quick one, for sure. What about you? What have you been playing?
First one I want to talk about, I think 2 weeks ago we played Import-Export.
Yes.
And that was my third play and your first.
Yes.
And this is from Dark Flight Games originally, but they've been renamed to Draper Games, Jordan Draper.
Yep.
And this is kind of a successor to the Glory to Rome or Montanai Carl Chuddick games. And it's all multi-use cards. This one is themed in shipping containers setting, and you actually have cards that represent your ships that are sending out these collections of different types of cards that represent different types of goods. And on your turn, you're building an engine by playing a different action, and other players can follow that action. And depending on where you play the cards and what type of cards you play, you can do a different thing, like going for a supply heavy strategy where you have access to the supply island and getting goods that way to put into your shipments. Or I went heavy pirate strategy so I could steal goods from the ships at sea. And it started out pretty slow. It's a very opaque system, and it's not exactly intuitive as to the difference of, goods or shipments or contracts. It's a lot of just similar terms that don't really show in the display or the tableau. But once you get the flow of it, turns were like 5 seconds. It was like,
they're so quick. Yeah.
I'm just going to sail here, or I'm just drawing up to 5 turns. And the other person can follow, but even then it was really quick. And by the end, we had a really good flow. And the game also ramps up really quickly, where your last turn, I think you got 14 credits.
It was quite a bit, yeah.
And it's a 50 credit victory condition. So it started out slow, but once everything clicked, we really were clipping along. And it's one of those, just like the Glory to Rome and Matanai games, once you've got a game or two under your belt, it's going to go really quickly. And it offers a lot of really interesting choices in a quick experience. Some people don't like it at 2 players, but we did play with the Tokyo Supply Island, which changes up things, and people say is a better version of the game. And playing it at 4 players without versus 2 players with it, I don't see any reason not to use the Tokyo expansion for any player count. I think it does just make it a little better with that supply island, and I think it's fine at 2 players. I don't think there's any reason not to play it at 2, especially with how quickly it plays.
Yeah, I know. I enjoyed myself pretty thoroughly. Actually, it had been in my cart for a long time, and after we played it, I was like, okay, so I'm finally gonna play this game, see if I want it or not. I'm getting a little bit more. I haven't been in the hobby super long, but I am getting pretty cynical pretty quick. So, but I was really impressed with it, and I definitely want to explore it more. A lot of things I like in games, like the auction. I've been really kind of digging just heavy economic games. This is like, there's an economy in it, but the actions are really the kind of the tableau and how asymmetric things get as you progress. That's a really interesting thing, and it's one of my favorite things in just games in general.
Let's see. So next up, you played Infamous Traffic.
Yeah, another Hollandspiel. So you're talking about opaque. This is the first. It's not my first Cole Worley game, but this is my second Cole Worley game. First one I owned. I did get to play Root right before it released at Dice Tower Con last year, and I was really impressed with it, and it really put him on my radar as a designer. So Infamous Traffic is a game where you are you're high society in England in the 1800s, right? The early 1800s. I think the game begins at 1830. And you are trying to get rich by doing some really, really unethical, disgusting things, like flooding the coasts of China with opium. And even if that means kind of destabilizing and destroying the region and causing wars and strife within the country. But it's all in the name of money, so you can go home and have like a good marriage, or like like literally one of the prizes in the game is you do all this. So you're just like flooding the area with opium, and you're trying to you're trying to just profit off of all this suffering. And one of the items you can get is a fancy hat, and it's worth like 2 victory points or a victory point. And it's a really cynical game. It's really bleak. But like you said, with I really felt like when we played Import Export, it was pretty opaque for the first couple turns. but you start kind of those wheels start turning. You kind of start, going with the flow and seeing how things work. This game, I think it took me like a full play to even begin to realize what I was doing. It was so opaque. It was so hard to kind of like the input. Like there's so many inputs that you can plug into, and there are so many butterfly effects from those inputs that it's so hard. It was such a fantastic game, though.
That seems to be an ongoing element of his designs, is that decisions can have such reaching consequences that it almost feels arbitrary at times.
It kind of did. It really did. Now you put it really well.
I really like his approach to design, though, and he put it in an interview we did at Gen Con in the terms of he sees the mechanics as verbs and the pieces of a game as the nouns to let players create their own stories and tell their own stories without having much flavor text or narrative written into the game with words, but letting the game and the mechanics that he designed with it tell the story. Yeah. And that one definitely seems like it follows that same ethos.
I mean, the story is overwhelming, but it's really important that it be told, because he's also he approaches like kind of that history in such a non-traditional way, where it stops being about England in and of itself and starts becoming like what terrible thing did they affect in this part of the world. Same thing with John Company. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like just the kind of sober take on it, I guess.
And it sounds like it puts it into personal terms, like showing these in a kind of dark humor way, like these individuals, not just like the entity of England is the
and yeah, I didn't want it to sound like that. It's just I was really enjoying myself. Like I was really digging the mechanics, and I was like, oh man, I got this opium, like I got a supply line going, and I'm just like churning out money because I get all this opium now. But like it took me a couple seconds to like actually step back from it, because I was enjoying the game so much. I should note I was also playing it 2-player, which probably isn't the best count to play it at, but me and Alyssa had like such a good time with it. But it's really different than it should be. Probably there was a lot less competition early. It was almost like a co-op in the beginning, because it's 2 players trying to establish these supply lines of opium into China. It's not something you can really do by yourself. And usually in a higher player count game, you are piggybacking off of other people, that you're using. Oh, I have the opium, you have the ships, this guy has the merchants or what have you, and you complete a supply line. But early in the game, we had to kind of come to a really delicate cooperation. And then I just betrayed her just really quickly afterwards. But no, I highly recommend checking it out. That is an Infamous Traffic. It's a Hollandspiel game, and they are a company out of Michigan I mentioned earlier. All their stuff is constantly available. You just have to order it, and they print it on demand and send it to you. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, you let me smell the fresh ink on melt butter there.
They're the stink. Okay, so they are the stinkiest games ever made. That's Hollandspiel's claim to fame.
Okay, staking on the Cole Worley train here. We played a game of Root a couple weeks back. We played 4-player, and I want to note this one because it was a really interesting mix of the factions. We played the Riverfolk, the Lizard Cultists, the Woodland Alliance, and the Vagabond. So we didn't have either the Marquise or the Erie, which are kind of the foundational factions that really hold the map together.
Big powerhouses.
And especially as the Woodland Alliance player, I noticed that myself and the Lizard Cultists, we fill a similar role. And because of that, we were just at each other's throats the whole game, much to your benefit, because we were using your services as the Riverfolk heavily.
Yes. The Riverfolk are the best expansion of that game. I've not played some of them, but that's a hot take for me.
I think they're my favorite faction from what they do to the game.
Yeah.
Like having the Vagabond changes the game because they're going to, depending on what they do to other players, that really affects other factions' ability to do certain things, because the Vagabond can just train wreck anybody they choose to with the right item layout and everything. But the Riverfolk just foundationally changed the game with the services they offer, with the movement, the troops, and the cards, especially the cards. Having that market to control the cards you can get makes every other faction have a lot more plays open and available.
Will definitely like just kept feeding me. He just kept feeding me lizards.
Yeah.
And I was just using those lizards to, I think I made, God, the last turn, I think I made like 16 points. I surged really hard.
You had well over 20 warrior tokens on your player board by the end there.
Yeah. And you've played Root probably close to 10 times the amount that I've played it. So I'm not going to speak as an expert on it, but I have noticed in my 4 plays now that it's a necessity to try to shut down the person that's ahead. Because if you don't, and this is every time someone doesn't shut down the player that's ahead, you're just like one turn too late.
Yeah.
They go, and but it's also hard to see who's ahead.
Yeah, I will say that the game, especially if you're playing for the first time or playing a specific faction for the first time, the game state isn't hard to read. You know, you see someone with a lot of pieces on the board in a certain place, or you see their victory token way ahead of everyone else. That's pretty clear. But the game can be hard to read in the sense that it might be hard to know how to stop them, especially with certain factions. Yeah. If you don't know how to make use of the tools and resources you have, or the cards you have, the game is pretty fragile in that respect. And like both times we played with Alyssa as the Vagabond, she's kind of just been off doing her own thing because she was still figuring it out and didn't know how to really stop you, or didn't know that she needed to, because she was just trying to play her own game and do her own thing. And I was just, like I said, me and Will were going back and forth with the Alliance and the Lizard Cultists, and they are so similar in the ways they function. And if they're in the same area of the map, they're not going to either one do much progress.
Yeah, and I will give you credit, because you kept telling Alyssa and Will, you're like, he's gonna, like, you just wait, just wait and see. And I didn't actually realize that you knew more about the Riverfolk than I did, because I didn't realize. I think my last turn I sat there and I was like staring for like a solid like 2 minutes at my board, and I was like, can I do this right now? Like, can I? And then I just turned out 16 points and just like I think I just broke 30.
Yeah. You had like 8 or 9 points just from dividends, I believe.
It was a lot. And that also might be why they're my favorite, because that's my only game of Root that I won, was when I was playing them. But I'm really looking forward to that. I think they ordered, after they sold out of the base game and the expansion, they ordered another print run from China. And I think pre-orders are up somewhere. I got mine on Board Game Bliss. So like some December or something like that. If you have not tried Root yet, just try it, because you might hate it, but it might be like one of the best things you've played this year.
Yeah, and I do, like I said, it is pretty fragile, but I've enjoyed every time I've played it. Balance-wise, it is one of the games where the players really have to, like you said, especially stick on the leader, because they can run away with it. We've played a lot of games recently where it seems like everything is just kind of going along slowly and then someone explodes. And that's happened in many of the games of Root I've played, when someone plays like the favor cards that can wipe out all clearings of a certain type. Yeah. That can score a ton of points. And there's
some huge, like, I've seen some really, really clever things done in that game. The system is also just like, it's, you know, you have 6 factions that all work extremely differently. And within those factions, the interaction, like the interconnections between the two, like you were talking about, the lizards and the Woodland Alliance, like they were just, it's almost like you guys were mortal enemies from the start.
Yeah. Which was, like I said at the start of this, that game really stood out as interesting, because without having the cats or the birds there, it completely changed the way the Woodland Alliance played, especially.
Yeah.
I've only seen the Lizard Cultists win one time, and that was when all 3 other players were new, and I was playing the Lizard Cultists. other than that, I haven't seen them win. And
that's right here.
Yeah, everyone online and Cole himself has said that they are purposefully not as heavily weighted on the balance scale. So I'm not sure. Like he mentioned putting out some tournament rules for like organized play, or like if people wanted to play competitively.
Yeah.
Whatever that means with a game like that. And I would be really interested to see how things would shake out if he did like a balancing pass and put out like a updated rule book for organized play or tournament play. But
I'd be so down to play some tournament routes.
Yeah, I'd see like if it would be like a bidding system of victory points, which is what Terra Mystica does with the races, something like that, or even just changing mechanically how points are scored for different factions, boosting some things or cutting some back. That would be really interesting. Or even seeing what maybe the map would look like if it were adjusted. But yeah, that's Root. We've both really enjoyed that since we started playing it back at Dice Tower Con.
Yeah. And just I just want to put out that I have a crush on Cole Worley, and that if you ever hear this, Cole, I know that you're married. I don't know. I forget what I said. You're gonna cut this out?
Nope, that's staying in.
Okay.
No, he was the nicest guy. Him and Kyle both were great to hang and talk with for a little bit at Gen Con. Super happy to see them both exploding with success with leader games. And let's see, the last one I want to touch on is Tigris and Euphrates, because I did teach you that a few weeks back.
Yes.
And this is the Reiner Knizia Classic, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. I've played the classic version. I learned on a handful of times, and then I got the app and played, just put in tons of games on there. And then I finally got a physical copy of the reprint that FFG did, the new edition. And teaching you, it was the first time I played that Fantasy Flight Games edition. And it was kind of hard to parse it because they've changed the terminology. They changed it from internal and external conflicts to revolts and wars. They still function the same, but they've just changed little things here and there with the wording and stuff. But what did you think coming into, you knew the game had a legacy and a reputation, but what did you think of it?
So I will preface this, and this is not going to be the last time I've said this. I'm only about 2 years into this hobby. So most people that I play with that are a little bit more seasoned than me, a little bit grizzled, I kept hearing Reiner Knizia's name, and I'm also not sure if that's how you pronounce his last name, but I'm going to go with it. It is?
I think so.
Okay. So I got a chance to play Modern Art was the first Reiner Knizia game I played, and I was just like, I was really, really blown away by it. I just want to try, auctions are just like one of my favorite mechanisms, and I just want to play all of his games now. I get to play High Society, and I love that. And so I had Tigris and Euphrates definitely wasn't what I expected after playing those two games. And I remember you teaching me and me like kind of, I don't know, I was psyching myself out because I was like, is it really just like you're putting down a tile? Is that it? But there has to be more. There has to be more than this. And as we started playing, I started getting those little morsels of game design, those little like, oh, okay, so this is how this interaction works. Oh, okay, I get it. And we're going through it, and I think you let me win, but I still I still wasn't sure how I felt about it. And I went home and I thought about it, and all I really know is that it has something special to it, and I definitely want to play it again, but I'm really not sure how I feel about it.
To clarify, I did not let you win. I played very greedily and aggressively, and every conflict went your way.
It was punishing.
For the conflicts that came out, or just overall throughout the game, I drew less than 5 red tiles, I believe. And that is extremely out of the averages of that game because red tiles are the most common. And I think all but one of our conflicts were in the temples, which are the red tiles. So that really hurt me on top of playing that very aggressive strategy. You wiped out 3 of my leaders with the first conflict, and I just never came back.
That, like, I didn't, like I said, I was kind of stumbling through that first game, but that did feel good. Yeah. I did know, that was good, but I just did.
And Tigris and Euphrates is back in the spotlight now because of the new version, Yellow and Yangtze, which is like the sequel to it that has hex tiles and a 5th color added. And that game, I've only played like a demo, like half game of it. It's a lot more fluid. The temples you build can move around. You have more control over the tiles you get, and you have more access to the devastation tiles in Yellow and Yangtze. So the game is a lot more fluid, but also kind of more forgiving, because one big mistake in Tigris and Euphrates can knock you out, which is exactly what happened.
Yep.
Even a 2-player, the board being as big as it is with a 2-player game, you would think you would have plenty of room to get back in. But the way we built the kingdoms, they just were pretty tight the whole game, and it cost me the game from that one mistake. But Yellow and Yangtze, you can make big plays and get back in. So I really want to play that more. But
I want to play too.
But Tigris and Euphrates is definitely a classic, and it's so tight, and it's so simple once you can grasp the way the conflicts work, that to me it's like an abstract, like chess or something, but with just a little more theme built into the system.
And there's just enough. I really liked the small amount of hidden information that was in the game. Like, it wasn't a small amount, but it's not enough to where you what am I trying to say? It wasn't to my detriment, I guess. It was enough to where I wasn't quite sure what you had, and I wasn't quite sure. Like, there was enough wiggle room there for you to bluff me, but I also had that same kind of. I probably wasn't taking advantage of it as well as you, but like you said, you got really unlucky with the draws. But I loved that just little bit of information that was hidden, because it obviously is like a central part of the game, but it was enough to make me want to play a little risky, but not too risky to where I would like. I remember you saying before we started, like, yeah, one big mistake, like if you lose one battle, you could just be out easily.
Yeah. He does really interesting things with playing the odds. Like you said, there's a little bit of bluffing and hidden information and the randomness of the tile drawing. But the system is wide enough that you can still make a lot of interesting plays and play around those odds. And to me, that's why the game stays so tight, as opposed to Yellow and Yangtze, which does have a lot more freedom in the system. Like there's a market row, when you play certain tiles, you can kind of determine what you're going to draw from in Yellow and Yangtze. And that feels good from the sense of you'll never miss the tile you really need. But I also kind of like the simplicity built into the original, and the way that you have to kind of play those odds. Like, I kept playing aggressively because I was like, well, there's more red tiles in that bag than any other color. I'm going to get one. I got really unlucky and didn't get one. It was just
unlucky, yeah.
But it was still probably the right play given the odds.
I also just want to play more of his games. I feel like he hasn't let me down yet.
Yeah. He's got such a long career, and he's put out so many. There was a good decade where people say he was just kind of putting out iterative stuff that was skippable. But he seems to be back. I just ordered Blue Lagoon, which I did play once. It's a very simple kind of route building, pick up and deliver 2-phase thing. It's weird, and it's somewhere between Through the Desert, which is another one of his classics, and Brass, which is really funny because it's such a simple game on the level of like King Domino or Queen Domino, but it's a very simple but very tight, very brilliant little game. I'm excited for you to try that one. But his other ones, like Ra, which is the kind of his big boy auction game.
I just want to do all the auction games.
Yeah. He's got the tightest auction games for sure. And High Society, like you mentioned, is like pure distilled tight auctions. And I would say, other than Tigris and Euphrates, High Society is probably my favorite of his, just because it's so pure. And you can teach that and play that with anyone.
It's true.
Like, I've had success playing with kids and families, and that game is great for that. But it's also like there's such a meaty decision space in those auctions of trying to remember what people have played as far as the denominations of the money and everything.
I think the best quote I heard about Reiner Knizia is that Reiner Knizia has made hundreds of games, and literally some of them are good.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's like he's put out so much over such a long time and spectrum that he's got more greats in his collection than most designers have total. So it's always worth looking into a Knizia design is how I feel.
And I'm really looking forward to trying out all of his other stuff. Whatever I can get my hands on.
Okay, so our feature game this week is going to be Brass. We're going to talk about the Birmingham and Lancashire versions. Brass is a Martin Wallace game, well over a decade old at this point, and it kind of had an infamously cheap-looking version of the original. The board and the production as a whole was just very plain and basic, old-school design, but it maintained its reputation because of the gameplay and the system and the mechanics being so tight and such an interesting and unique set. So you have the Birmingham version, and we just played that this week.
Yes.
And I played the original a long time ago, and then I started playing the app, and that is the Lancashire version. And as far as I'm aware, that it is exactly the same as the original, just with the only change being the original had a different map for 2 players, and the new version just takes out cards like the Birmingham does for the different player counts.
Yeah.
But the net effect is the same, and other than that, the mechanics and design is the same. The Birmingham version makes a couple of changes. Most notably, it adds the beer resource and the brewery tiles and industry you build. And there are a couple other things. It doesn't have the ports that is in Lancashire, which is something I think you will find intriguing when you figure out how those work. And there's a couple other things that are changed from one to the other, but let's just talk about what Brass is before we get into the details.
Let's do it.
So Brass is a game set in the Industrial Revolution, and you're playing these business moguls trying to build up industry of different sorts in England. And you have everything from cotton mills to, in the first part, you're building the canals and shipping goods that way. And in the second phase of the game, you kind of do a reset, and you're doing the same industries and building up these basically better versions of those industries. But instead of doing canals and shipping, you're doing rails and train shipping. So what do you think about the overall game now that you've played Brass Birmingham, a handful of times?
Yeah, I think we just got our 8th play in. And this is a game that it was actually the first game that my girlfriend backed on Kickstarter. And it was simply because of the way it looked. Like, she was just like really into it. And someone she really likes on Instagram likes it too. So she was really excited for it. And we got it, and it plays it like you said, it plays at 2 players by just taking out like some of the cards, and you have a kind of a smaller section of the board to work with. We have not played Lancashire, or we haven't played the original. This is the first and only experience with Brass we have, but we were just obsessed with that game. We haven't. I think we played it 3 times in the first week, which is kind of a record for us, I think, brand new games.
Especially for one that meaty. That is a big one.
It's a big boy. It's a big boy for sure. And she loves it even more than I do. And I think it's another thing, it's hers, so it's kind of like her baby. But me and her and I have been getting kind of more into these heavier, especially games with economies, heavy euros, train games, stuff like that. And she's just taken to it really, really, really quickly.
So we played 3-player Birmingham this week, and to me, let's go over the differences so I can give you a little bit of context for my thoughts on which one I like better or which parts of each one I like more. So I said the main thing is there's a beer resource and industry tiles as opposed to the ports that are in the original. There are loans in both, but the main difference there is when you take a loan in Birmingham, you take 30 credits or $30, whatever, and go down 3 steps in the income track. But in Lancashire, you can take 10, 20, or 30 and go down 1, 2, or 3. So you can control how much. If you just need a little bit of money to pull off a big action, you don't have to take as big a hit.
Okay.
But that's maybe not necessarily the best move in an efficiency context because, if you're taking an action, which is really the limiting thing in this game, aside from money or the resources you need to complete the actions, you might as well go ahead and do the 30 loan and get enough credits to fund a lot of things in the future. Go big or go home. Yeah. So that's interesting. Also, the loans are limited at the end of the game because in Lancashire, money does have a credit to victory point transfer amount.
Oh, okay.
So in Lancashire, once the deck runs out in the second phase, you can't do any more loans. So those last 3 turns, you won't be able to do loans because that could be just the most efficient victory point action. Okay.
What's the conversion?
I don't know offhand. It's not great, but it's
something.
Yeah. People have also solved Lancashire. Like people say there's like, if you go first, this is what you do. You just immediately develop the iron tiles twice. Okay. Because that's really the limiting one, in especially in the first era of Lancashire, I think, is the kind of agreed upon strategy. So if you go first in Lancashire, you basically always do that, and the map is pretty solved, and it's a lot tighter than the Birmingham map. There are a couple cities that only have one way in, and those can be kind of, it's really tight. And the other big thing is the modular trade with the cities in Birmingham. That's not present in Lancashire, but instead there's a foreign market you sell to when you're selling cotton, and the value that they'll buy it is kind of a randomized thing, and it can hit 0. And if you flip a 0 or if you bottom it out, it can just end your action. But if other players have built ports, you can ship to their ports. You can sell to their ports and activate their ports to upgrade those tiles for them. Okay. So those are the main differences. And here's what I've come to as far as conclusion. I can't decide which one I like more, but I've come to this weird stasis of I like the first half of Birmingham more, and I like the second half of Lancashire more. So in Birmingham, to build a rail in the second era, or in both, you can build 1 or 2 rails in the second era. And in Birmingham, it's limited by beer. And beer is so tight because it's owned by the other players, but if you have access to it, you can use it. And if you put out beer, you basically have to chain it that same turn. Your first action, put out a beer, second action, use it. Yeah. Because otherwise, the other players are going to use it before you can make use of it.
It's like the tightest resource in the second half of the game by far.
But I find that really limited, or at least in our play, and it seems to be like it would be the go-to or the kind of like always present issue. It really limited what you could do in the second era. Yeah. Especially with what you could reach, because you want to build the double rails. Like
you do.
Like we said, the action economy
and it's so expensive too. But it's still it's kind of like a game that it feels so open when you first start playing it, and you have this whole hand of cards and the board's open, and you're just like, I can go anywhere. Like I can do anything right now. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, the deck just ran out. I only have like 4 more turns before all of my level 1 industries just go away. All my canals, the entire network that I've just like toiled at building just like goes up in smoke.
Yeah. And so I found in that game, at least, that by the end of the second era, it was basically like point salad filling, in that you had just a couple of options because the beer was so limited. Yeah. And it came down to, well, putting this here gives me 3 points, putting it here gives me 4, but it gives the other player 2. It felt like it was almost playing itself at the end.
Yeah, I can see that.
And how limited it was.
Especially, I remember the last like 3 turns each of us took. It was very like, oh, this is like, I just need, you're just trying to get as many points out of those last 3 turns as possible.
Yeah.
Which is never like, it's never an ideal way to end a game.
It kind of felt set in stone at the end.
Yeah, it did.
Whereas Lancashire at the end, some people don't like how it plays, but you're really throwing out railroads all over the place and making a lot of big plays. I felt like most of the big plays were done in the beginning of the second era in Birmingham or the end of the first era.
Okay.
And in Lancashire, it feels like that stays like that tempo towards the end, and I like that. But the first era of Birmingham does feel better, having kind of a broader scope that you can go a lot wider with what you're building. And we should talk about the cards and the way they're used in this system in both games. You have location cards and you have industry cards. If you play a location card, you can build in any of those spaces, whether you're connected there or not with your network. And you can build whatever industries are present there. You can build on those spaces. And if you have an industry card, you can build in any space that's connected to your network. And that's the same in both of them.
Yeah.
So that really, like, when you're learning the game, you might think that's going to really limit you, but like you said, you really feel like you can do anything at the start of the game, because that card play, it's a really simple system that has just enough tightness and just enough limiting effect on your options that it'll kind of steer you, but you still have a ton of openness on how you're going to approach the board in the game.
Yes, and so this is also something that I realized about the system, the system with the card play. So you've got the locations and you've got the industries, right? In the beginning, the locations are kind of like when you're just starting out and you're in the canal era. Those locations let you go so much farther and do so much more than the industries, because your industries have to be based on your network. But as the board starts filling up and as the game starts progressing, those locations mean less and less, and those industry cards start meaning more and more. So it's kind of interesting how the value of one versus the value of the other kind of fluctuates as the game progresses. And also, I'm not sure if they have this in Lancashire, but the scout action in Birmingham.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't touch on. So go ahead and explain the scout action.
So the scout action lets you... So every action you take in Brass, you have to get rid of a card. You have to discard a card to do it. So this action is no different, but you have to discard 3 cards total. And then you can draw a wild location and a wild industry. And they're exactly how they sound. They are wild. You can do anything with them, and they're really, really good at like kind of fixing bad situations you got yourself into. I know you were saying earlier that when you first get you're opening 8 hands, you're opening 8 card hand, you're kind of looking at it, you're looking at the board, you're seeing what you can do, you're looking at the merchants who you can sell to, and you're kind of trying to apply yourself into these like possibilities. You're trying to figure out what's going to be the best. But that scout action just cracks that whole thing open. Like, it does take an action, but those cards have saved my ass so many times. I can't even begin to describe. Because if you have plans and someone takes that spot or someone builds in that canal, it's really, really difficult to reconcile that. There's nothing you can do. You just have to come up with a new plan. What makes it easier is having those kind of 2 outs. You know what I mean?
So let me explain how they work in Lancashire. You don't have the scout action, but if you want to build somewhere and you don't have the right cards, you discard 2 cards.
Oh, so it's like even more wild.
Well, it's the same effect, but a less efficient version. Because
it's 2 cards per.
Yes.
Oh.
Because in Birmingham, you're getting 2 wild cards that are going to fuel 2 actions in the future. Whereas this is just 2 for 1 flat, as opposed to 3 for 2, which is a much better. And having that 2 future actions that are wild versus having that 1 now immediate. The Birmingham one is a lot more forgiving and a lot more efficient, but the Lancashire one is just 1 action. You're getting rid of 2, so that's an interesting change.
I feel like I really want to play Lancashire. Because this is kind of the most I've gone into it, really. Like, I was kind of one of those people that got Birmingham and I was like, well, I don't need another Brass game. And I probably still don't need it, but I definitely want to try it.
Yeah, you would definitely enjoy playing it. The other thing I wanted to touch on is that the board is a lot more static feeling in Lancashire. Like, it feels like the things changed a lot more from Era 1 to 2 in Birmingham. It felt like a lot of the board got wiped. It feels like a lot more of the board gets developed in Era 1 of Lancashire with higher tier industry tiles.
Yeah.
So going into the second era felt like it was more open in Birmingham. And we made some of those big plays at the beginning of that. But like I said, it's still cluttered down enough, or it was cluttered enough that it narrowed down our options by the end to where we were all kind of like, okay, well, I only have a couple of things I can do, and kind of back and forth on what's the best efficiency for points.
And you're kind of building to it like the whole time. You're building to all those tiles that are going to flip and score you a ton of victory points. So one thing I do want to touch on, if people have not played Brass, the develop action is basically, so you have kind of a tech tree of industries, and each industry of a certain type has a certain number on it. It goes like 1 to like, I know in Birmingham you can get up to like, I think level 7 or level 8 in an industry, but you can only build the industry at the lowest industry in that tier. So all the ones that go all like the 6s and the 7s, they're all really, really high in terms of the victory points they score you. But you have to get to them. You have to build those other ones first. So what develop allows you to do is just take them and throw them across the room, and they're not part of your player board anymore. You can just go straight into a more sophisticated industry.
So I will say that I'm not the hugest fan of Brass as a whole. I do like both of the games, but having played on both now, I don't think I want to own either of them.
Okay.
For that type of game, by the end, especially with Birmingham, more so than Lancashire, it felt like the system, while starting out very open, by the end of the game, I don't feel like I have much power to do what I want to do. And I don't know if I just need to get better at the system. Like, especially in the Birmingham game we played, I was relying heavily on loans and did not build up much income. And that really, really hurt my ability late game. But even playing Lancashire, I feel kind of similar even when I have gone heavy income and had plenty of money. The system is so tight by the end and so limiting. And even taking into account the player interaction in that game, which is mostly indirect blocking, or when you use someone else's goods they've put out on the board, you're helping them because you're helping activate their industries and flip them for the points and the income gain. It just kind of feels, it's not the type of direct conflict I like in a Euro. It's almost like passive conflict. It's like it's so beneficial to them when you use their resources that it doesn't feel like the best move. Like there was a time in the Birmingham one where I had to use someone else's beer. I had to use Alyssa's beer to activate what I was trying to do. And I really didn't want to do that because it helped her. That move ended up helping her more than it helped me. Yeah. But that was still the best thing I could do in that turn. So it's kind of, by the end of the game, I feel like I'm faced with a lot of bad choices. And I like that in some games, but for some reason it doesn't click fully for me. I think it's a really, really unique system, and I think it's a really, really well-designed game. But I'm kind of middling on it overall.
It's just not your cup of tea.
Well, no, I would play. I definitely want to play more.
You just don't own it, so it's not quite to own yet.
I think that's where I'm at.
Okay,
and I don't know that it would get to that point.
That's fair enough.
So there's another one he came out with after the original Brass. Was it Age of Steam?
I thought was it Steam first or then Age of Steam? You've been in this hobby longer than I have. Come on, man.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one is which. So this is the only Martin Wallace game I've played.
Age of Steam?
Brass.
Oh, Brass. Okay.
Yeah. So I've heard some people say that they like that one way more.
Oh no, Age of Steam has like a cult following.
Yeah.
Like it's I really want to try it. Like I'm dying to try it. I know they're reprinting it. I think Eagle Griffin is reprinting it, and they're the ones that did the original, but they are going to. I mean, I've seen it. It just looks atrocious. Like it just looks like, but I'm getting.
Maybe it'll get the same kind of treatment as Brass.
I mean, I don't even care. Like I've been playing the ugliest. I've been playing the ugliest games lately, and just like all games about trains, and I'm just like so into it. Just games about trains and shipping containers. Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from there. It does feel a little like, determined at the end, kind of what you're doing. You're just trying to execute on this thing that you've been doing the whole game. I really enjoy it. Like I said, I've played it like 8 times now, and even though the first 2 plays, like we messed up like a pretty big role, no 2 plays have really felt the same. It's always felt very tense and very desperate and very rewarding when you can actually pull off what you want to pull off. Like when you can slam down like the double, the level 3 and level 5 pottery tiles that give you like 30 points.
Yeah, when you activate a lot of stuff on one big move, that is very
feels
rewarding.
good. It feels so good, and just like getting it, just like starting to get your income up, just like that little incremental. You like, oh, I'm getting $10 at the end of this, and then like, oh, now I'm getting 15, and it just like starts compounding, but then it feels like those actions just burn up so quick. You're like, it's kind of like this, the cave is collapsing on you, and you have to try to run to the edge and then get out and score 30 victory points with pottery or however you want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's what it is for me. That is my hang up with the game. You start out with that hand of cards that it's basically giving you a few things you can't do, because you can do almost anything at the start with that hand of cards. Yeah. But by the end, you're looking at the cards you have left and trying to figure out, what can I do?
What can you do?
There's very little options left. And I like games that stay pretty open.
Or like a lot of games, they start where you're very limited, and then as you progress, your possibilities kind of bloom.
They branch out.
And this is kind of almost like you're saying. This is almost kind of like
this one funnels you.
Yeah, it funnels you.
You start out.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's both from the cards and the map, and like you mentioned, other players taking a route, and you're just not able to go there.
Yeah, I'm just not. Yeah, it's like I'm just not gonna go. I'm just not shipping. I'm not ship. I can't ship cotton this game, I guess.
Yeah.
And all this cotton that I've developed is just useless now. I see what you're saying, Dave, and I respect it, and I respect you. I just really like that game. Alyssa likes it even more. If she listens to this later, she's going to be really, really upset with you.
No, I'm not saying I don't like it. I do want to play more, especially Birmingham, because that's the one I've only played once. And I do respect the system and the design. I think it's a really smart game. And I think it's really unique. I haven't played anything that kind of merges those types of systems that way. And the card play is my favorite part of it, because it's such a open system. I just don't like how limiting it gets towards the end. But I still like the game. I still recommend anyone check it out and try it.
And especially if you're just kind of been like, if you've been kind of hitting those like medium heavy Euros and you haven't tried Brass yet, definitely try Brass.
Yeah, it needs to be one you've at least played.
Yeah, you need to, because it can definitely show you some stuff that you've never seen before. Yeah. It definitely has some stuff that's wholly unique.
And it's a game that also definitely rewards skill. Like I mentioned, people have almost solved Lancashire, and for some of them that's why they don't like the new one, I think, because they are so familiar with the old version and that system that either they're apprehensive of the changes making the game better, or they just feel comfortable with Lancashire, and that's why they want to stick to it, which I can respect that. If you feel really comfortable with the game and you know how to do the things you want to do, that's always a fun thing to play. But I can't say if Birmingham's better or not, and I think that they did a really good job of changing up just enough to make it worth playing both. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is the sequel, just forget the old one.
Yeah. I will say that I'm going to say this with full confidence and on record, I have solved Brass Birmingham. And the solution is build pottery every time. That last tile scores you 20 victory points. It's 20 victory points for a tile. Like, you can't go wrong with that. Just do it.
I think the key to that strategy is being left alone.
Yeah, and also be left alone. Also, when someone tries to take the pottery spots from you, don't let them. You just say don't do that. And it's your copy of the game, and you will leave if they do that. And those are my thoughts.
I think that sums up our thoughts on Brass, and that covers Birmingham and Lancashire pretty well. That's from designer Martin Wallace and Roxley Games.
Roxley Games.
And I will say you have the Kickstarter edition with the really nice poker chips.
They are kind of nice.
But the retail version doesn't have those, but it is available for like $40, which is, I think, a steal.
It is a steal.
Even without the poker chips, the game looks great, and it's a really nice production. And usually the games like that, we're used to paying closer to $100 for.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see a company put out such a nice production at a very affordable price. Okay, so for our topic of discussion this week, I want to talk about our background with the tabletop gaming and our history, how we got into it, and also our kind of comical story of how we actually met and started playing games together. So, Mike, what is your history with board gaming?
Okay, so in the 5th grade, I had a friend whose older brother had this game called Magic the Gathering, and we started playing that. And I got really into that as a 5th grader, and then I kind of stopped playing it. And later, after I graduated high school, I kind of rediscovered it and started playing pretty competitively. Went to, a couple qualifiers, stuff like that. I was never really that good, but I was really hungry for it. I was really passionate about it. And then that kind of died down. I've always played video games. And then about 2.5 years ago, I just wanted something to do when my friends came over. And I heard about this game called Catan, and I was like, okay, let's it's a board game. People say it's really good, so let's get that. And I got Catan, and we really started having a great time with it. And I was like, okay, it was board game. I guess we're gonna play this game now. It'll be a cool thing we can do when we get together. And I started getting really into it. I got the expansion that played 5 or 6 players, and I was like, looking at, oh, did they have more expansion for this? And I discovered this website called Board Game Geek, and they had a top 100 board games, and I'm like, oh my god, top 100. And then from then, it was just kind of a long story short. I got Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. I got a couple other, big boys, and I started. I just progressively started going, from lighter stuff to the more medium heavy fare, and that's where I've kind of settled ever since. I just played my first 18xx game not too long ago, about a month ago now, and it's just over for me now. It's just that's.
You're a train guy now.
I'm a train guy now. I like trains. I didn't like. There are people that are train guys, and I'm one of those people now. What about you, Dave?
So I grew up going to my grandparents' house a ton on the weekends with all my cousins, and they had a small collection of classic board games, things like Chinese checkers and Yahtzee and stuff like that. And we always played a ton of those growing up, and that was kind of the family activity, was playing classic board games. Never really played Monopoly or anything, but the really old school stuff. A lot of checkers and Chinese checkers and stuff like that. And then in 2010, I believe it was, my buddy bought me Catan for my birthday, and we played that. It took us 2 hours to figure that game out, not having any clue what it was. And the first night of playing that, we were all kind of what is this? We don't understand. But we stuck with it and played it a handful of times, and that really kind of sparked my interest as well. And I think from there, the next game I bought was Hive, because it looked like a game I grew up playing, and I was like, this looks interesting. It's, it's like chess but without a board. We played that a lot. And then the next game after that I got was Mage Knight. And
that's a big. Ooh.
Yeah. But luckily that's a great one to play solo, so I just kind of dove in.
Vlad Chevadel, man.
Yeah, dove right in, and that that really sparked my passion for board games, seeing what they had become and how much there was to explore and to enjoy. And it really took off when we moved to Florida here in 2015. We moved here at the beginning of 2015, and I went to board game night at CSI at Cool Stuff. And they had, at the time, it was like a good 100, 120 people there on Wednesday nights playing. Since then, it's kind of died off because they opened a lot more stores in the area.
Yeah.
And the groups kind of all splintered off to the closest locations to them. So I don't go there much anymore, but I did meet a lot of people and get really into the hobby that way, because every time I would go, I would get to play 5 or 6 games that I'd never even heard of and learn all kinds of new games and kind of fill out what I liked and what I didn't. And I started going to Gen Con with some friends I met here, and I've been going there every year since. This was the 4th in a row I'd been to. So I just really got into the hobby big time once we moved to Florida here. And much like you, I've really went towards the deeper end of the hobby and the more heavy Euros and less of the thematic games. But funny enough, we do play a ton of like small 2-player light games. I tell people I'm on both ends of the spectrum. Like, I love heavy, long games, and I also love the really, really good, small, short games. Stuff like I have the whole shelf up there with like Arboretum and Targi and stuff like that you can play with, 2 people in 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But it offers a full experience. So that's kind of my taste, and that's why we mesh so well on our taste, because we have similar interest in the more strategic Euro style gaming. And on that note, the way we met was really funny. I started Let Them Eat Cardboard as an Instagram account this summer, and we followed each other. You have Board Game Cats.
I have boardgame_cats, which is a Instagram page of my cats sitting in the lids of my board games.
And I have Let Them Eat Cardboard, and we followed each other, and we had talked about being at Dice Tower, and we had seen each other's pictures of games we were bringing, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then I sat down to play Root because it was in the hotness area, and I was like, wow, I can't believe they have a copy of Root before it's even been delivered. I want to learn this. And we sat down and just randomly sat together, and at the end of that game, we were like, oh, we're planning on playing blah, blah, blah. And I showed you the picture of the games I brought, and you're like, hey, yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I've seen this before.
Yeah, and you're like, hey, I think I follow you on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then we realized we had talked, and then after that, we realized not only had we talked before that convention, we live like 20 minutes away from each other.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very serendipitous.
And we've been gaming ever since then, playing. We've played a ton of stuff, a good variety.
Yeah, we really have.
And I've shown you some stuff you've missed out on in your career, and you've taught me some of these more obscure games that I would not be able to get my hands on otherwise.
I like the weird stuff, for sure. We still got to do 1846.
Yes.
Or 1889.
We'll start with 46.
We'll do 46 first? Okay. Yeah. All right.
Is that that's the better one to dive in with, right?
If you're used to Euros, I assume.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not I have a lot of friends that know way more about 18XX, but I mean, they're all good. They're all good to me. They're all just like, I'm a train guy now, like I said.
So it's relevant to our game of the week. How different are the 18XX games in relation to Brass, Birmingham versus Lancashire, given the fact that you've only played one Brass and one Lancashire, but what you know of the system, how different are they?
Okay, so they both have trains in them, and that's about it. That's about it.
Not 18XX versus Brass, but like the differences between Lancashire and Birmingham.
Okay.
Compared to like contextualizing that with like 1846 versus 1880.
Just like as a system.
Yeah.
So as a system, from what I understand about both systems, if I were to contextualize it, I would say that both brasses sound similar enough, where there's just like, as long as you don't change anything major, and as long as you just the system's kind of so well put together that you just have to make some minor changes, and just doing that like gives you an entirely different gaming experience, which is kind of the common thread for a lot of these 18XX games. Because from what I understand, and I might be butchering this, Francis Tresham, he made the first 18XX game, 1829. And then his follow-up was 1830, which just tweaked a couple rules, but just like completely changed the way the game's
far-reaching effects for a little minor change.
For just and it basically became like they're very different games, and there's two families. And I will say this right now, before I get into this, if you were like me and you like your Euros, medium and heavy Euros, you like your abstract stuff like that. If you've been thinking about getting into 18XX and you're nervous about it, just dive in, please. It's so good. It's so easy to just like get lost in it. And it's not, they're kind of intimidating at first, but once you learn one, and 1846 is the one that we learned, the rest of them come a lot easier from what I understand. But please do yourself a favor and play the system. It's so good.
It's interesting. They're their own niche, almost like war games are a niche within the hobby.
Yeah.
18XX is its own entire genre.
It's just a whole genre based off of like two
One
games.
system, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And on that note, let's talk about some of the designers we really like. You mentioned Vlada earlier when I brought up Mage Knight. Vlada is definitely one of my top designers. And I think he is notable for blending theme and mechanics in such clever ways. Things like Dungeon Pets, which is one of his worker placements.
Yeah, Dungeon Pets great.
It does really interesting things with the bidding for worker spaces and all that, but it integrates the theme and mechanics in ways that make the game interesting and thoughtful, but also like funny ways, like when a pet disappears, then a meat appears on the market, and it's totally not related, but just when you think about it, little touches like that, I think, really make his games go from just a collection of mechanics to being some of the most thematic games out there, while still being very deep.
He also designed like Galaxy Trucker and then Through the Ages.
Yeah.
Like that, just that separation is huge.
Yeah, the breadth of his designs are, I think, probably the best in the industry. Like you have Codenames and Mage Knight,
yeah,
or Through the Ages and Galaxy Trucker, like you mentioned. And they're all so good. He's got one game that people don't consider very good, and that's Bunny Bunny Moose Moose.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
But other than that, I think pretty much universally his entire collection of designs is praised, and there are people that love all of them. I don't think I've played one I didn't like. I do want to play more of his. There's some more obscure ones that are hard to get your hands on.
He's kind of prolific too. Like he's not like Knizia isn't the only super prolific designer.
Yeah. Sally.
Is that what you think about Vlad Shavatal?
Good thing I can just cut and paste.
Yeah.
Hey, is there a dog walking? Is that why you're being bad? Yeah. This isn't your podcast.
All right.
So what's one of your favorite designers?
So I have two that come to mind, but I'm going to talk about Alexander Pfister. So Alexander Pfister, one of the first Euros that we got that's actually still in my collection is Great Western Trail. And that was my first game of his. And I have played Mombasa, which I quite enjoy. Oh My Goods, that I really, really like that. And also Port Royal. So Great Western Trail and Mombasa are kind of his two bigger designs. The other two are just like some kind of short push your luck card games. But he has two really, really solid hits for me. And other than the fact that I just really like his games, I don't know what it is. He just really knows how to make some very engaging mechanisms and kind of couple them together, like, you know, surround them with things that work well together. So Great Western Trail has like a rondelle that you kind of move, you know, you can move a certain amount of spaces forward, but you can never move back and stuff like that. And the space you land on determines the actions that you can select. So,
and it's got the deck building mechanic with the cows and the handles.
It's got the deck building, and it's not like the deck building, like, it doesn't feel terrible. You know what I mean? It's very...
It's integrated very
It is very integrated. And Mombasa has like this really, really cool action selection mechanism that I like. I don't think I've found a game that does it in a way that I like more than it happens in Mombasa. But you're essentially like, you're playing cards for actions, and you're playing, they have like 3 piles of cards. You play 1 card to each pile. You resolve those actions. You then take one of the discards from a pile, one of those piles that had been previously played, and you put it back in your hand. And the other cards, including the one you just played for the pile you just picked up, they get discarded. So you're kind of building like 3 separate discard piles, and in those piles you have to kind of manage actions that go together well, so that later on a turn you can pick up like, oh, there's like 5 cards in this discard pile that all work really well together, so I'm gonna pick them up, and then I'm gonna execute them, on a later turn and do something even better with them. And that's something I really, really enjoy. And like Port Royal and Oh My Goods, they're both like kind of push your luck, random-y card games, but they're short enough to where the randomness doesn't bother me. And they got some really interesting ideas. Especially I've had really good luck with Port Royal in terms of like people that are new to the hobby really picked up on that one quick. It's a really good gateway. Alexander Pfister. I'm really a fan of what he does, and I'm hoping to see what he does next and get to try it, hopefully.
On the other end, something I would never put in front of a newcomer to the hobby would be a Splotter game. And they are some of my favorite designers in that their games are wholly unique. They do things differently than the rest of the industry. They've been doing it since before most of these companies existed, going back into the 90s. And even their games from like late 90s, early 2000s feel fresh when you play them today because they're so unique. Something like Antiquity, predates all the other Civ board games out there almost, other than like the original.
Yeah, the Francis Tresham one.
Yeah, but it's so different than that at the same time. And their games are so deep and so wide, but they're not complex. Their rules are like 8-10 page rule books, which for the game and the depth is really brief. And something like Food Chain Magnate, it's a very simple system. And other than like the dinner time flowchart of who's going to eat where, once you grasp that, it's such a simple system to look at and try to figure out what do you want to do. And all of their games feel like that to me. Like you can do almost anything. It's a sandboxy approach, very open, very broad game, but every choice is so important, including like the very first choice you make.
So Food Chain Magnate was our first Splotter. It was your first too, right?
Yes.
So you sit down and play Food Chain Magnate for the first time, and you're like, okay, I get this. Like, I get why people like enjoy this. And then you get a chance to play. My second game by Splotter was Great Zimbabwe, and it was so different than Food Chain, but it had so many like similarities, like the spatial puzzles that they put in their games, and the really kind of quirky art, and turn order is always very important. And above everything, I think that the people in Splotter make games that just there's no like, they don't stop you from just destroying yourself.
Yeah.
They don't stop you from just dying a really painful death in your first game. And that's something that I used to not enjoy, but as I've kind of advanced through this hobby, I like that more and more. I like kind of dangerous things that can hurt you, and if you're not careful, or don't let you. It's almost like when you play a Splotter, you're just like walking through a pitch black cave without any lights on the first time, and every time that you die and respawn at the front of the cave, you have a little bit more knowledge of like how. Okay, so definitely don't. When you hear that echo, don't start running and fall down a chasm to your death, and you have to wait 2 hours to finish the game, and you have zero money. That's my shorthand on how Splotters go for the first time you play them.
I think they do a great job of giving you the open sandbox And aside from Antiquity, the games themselves don't feel punishing. Like Food Chain is not punishing in the system, it's punishing in the interaction.
Yes.
And I really, really like that. You know, it's the kind of game where I'll make an interesting comparison to Carcassonne, the classic entry tile laying game. People play Carcassonne, and for a while, you know, there's kind of an arc of people learning that game where, oh, I'm just building my stuff and I'm going to put my meeples here, and they're building their stuff, they're going to get their points there. And then someone says, wait, if I place this tile right here, I completely screw them and block them. And this game just went from being super friendly, just we're building our own little things on this big map, to the most cutthroat game and the meanest game. And that's what Splotters feel like to me. Is like, at first everybody's kind of just feeling their way, like you said, through the dark and trying to figure out what to do in the system at that big strategic level. But then there's always that one tactical moment where everything changes and the game just becomes insanely mean. And in Food Chain, it usually is like the defining moment of the game. Someone makes that marketing campaign at the right time and makes that one play that just screws everyone else.
Or like a big luxury manager play.
Yeah, something like anything. There's always that crucial moment, and I love that in the games. Some people don't like the way that especially in Food Chain, it's kind of a runaway leader, similar to Tigris and Euphrates.
Yeah.
Like, you know, one bad play can cost you the game, but that game can go on for another 2-3 hours.
I can, like, I don't disagree with those people. Like, I feel when I first started playing games, I didn't like that kind of stuff, because I'm like, I have to learn. I have to play this game like 5 times before I can even start like playing it right. But I've definitely grown to appreciate that. And if I wasn't clear enough with my bad cave analogy, when you first go into a Splotter and you don't know what you're doing, and you play with someone that does know what they're doing, you're just gonna get crushed.
Yeah.
Even like, we had a buddy over and we played a 3-player game of Food Chain Magnate, and Alyssa and I at that point maybe had like 20 or so plays of Food Chain. We had a very, you know, not expert, but we were formidable at least. And we were trying to, we kind of explained the milestones. We explained the sort of starts that you can have in that game. And other than that, we just kind of he's like, you know, you guys, it's okay. I'm just going to try to learn it. So we didn't really hold back. And it's just like every time you see someone play a Splotter for the first time, or someone's first Splotter, he just did not do well. It was just not, he was sitting there not making any money, getting crushed by us left and right. And he at least enjoyed himself enough he wants to play it again. So that's a good sign. He's more resilient than I am. That's
one thing I'll say that I really like about their games is, even if you're in last place doing poorly, the systems are interesting enough that I have fun in that sandbox.
Yeah.
You know, in Antiquity, when things are spiraling out of control, that can be fun to like figure out how you can stabilize.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing with 18xx. Like they're tough enough as systems that you can't play them with that kind of mentality that I'm not going to win. Why am I even playing? You have to be like, so what can I do here to like learn more so I'm ready for next time? You got to be a little bit more. You got to be ready to lose in those games.
All right, so round us out with one last designer that you really, really appreciate.
One last designer I really, really appreciate. Well, I'm going to go with Uwe Rosenberg. He designed my favorite game ever, Le Havre. He's designed Le Havre and Agricola, and he's designed those games, in fact, multiple times over. He's even designed those games even more than that, but you also lay tiles. And then he also designed a bunch of games where you just lay tiles. I mean, what can you say, man? Like he's just got that formula, and he just like keeps trying to, you know, fine tune it and stuff. And
very iterative.
I almost respect that a little bit, but I mean, I have had and do have a couple of his big box games, Fields of Arle, Caverna, stuff like that. They're just like Le Havre is just still my favorite. I don't think I've played one that came close. Maybe Agricola.
To me, Uwe is in the same space as Knizia. He's done so much, and he has those gems that are all-time greats. Like, I consider Agricola the quintessential medium weight Euro. You know, if you had to show one game to someone and say this is what board games are, this is what a Euro game is.
I don't disagree with that.
I think Agricola is a perfect choice for that. And it's also the perfect choice for like that space of medium weight complexity and gameplay. But especially lately, ever since Feast for Odin era, he's definitely in that iterative cycle where he puts out, he put out the tile laying quadrilogy after or around Feast for Odin. And the two best games that he's done with tile laying were the big box Feast for Odin and the stripped down to the bare minimum Patchwork. But all of those other ones he put out in between, like Indian Summer and the Harvest one, all those, to me, they're just somewhere in that nebulous space between a big box game and the stripped down 2-player. And to me, they just completely missed.
Yeah. And he makes a lot of those games that are kind of in that space where it's like, yeah, this is a good game. But there's nothing, it's not super remarkable. It's not something that you really need. It's something that you'll like, you would never want to play, but if someone suggests it, you'll be like, yeah, sure, let's play Indian Summer. But when I think of like Le Havre, I just think, I just want to play that game as soon as possible. Like, it's one of those, like, it's always on my, even if I just play it, it'll be a couple days later and I'll be like, I gotta play that game again soon. Gotta play Le Havre again. I love it so much.
Agricola is one of the ones I played early in my gaming career thanks to the app. And I think it's his best design. I do like Feast for Odin more, but Agricola I will always play as well. And he's got some big expansions coming out for Caverna and Feast for Odin. Caverna, interestingly, will add some variability to the game, which it desperately needs.
It really does.
And Feast for Odin is just going whole hog on the more of everything that already has a ton in the base game, like 3 more action boards and like 70-something new tiles and more and that's the first of 2 expansions. Maybe a third. So like, I can't imagine how big that'll be an entire shelf worth of Feast for Odin. I don't think that game needs it, but Caverna definitely needs something more.
I will say I like Feast for Odin a lot more than I like Caverna.
Yeah.
But I also kind of don't care about either of them that much. I'll play them. I'd rather play Agricola than Caverna. And also I have Fields of Arle, but Fields of Arle it's a game I own, and I'm just like, I don't want to pull that off and like set it up. It's so much stuff and things. It's so much, and it's it always comes down to like, man, I just want to play Le Havre. I just want to play Le Havre. I think Agricola. I've played Le Havre a lot more than I have played Agricola, but I do agree with you. I think that it's a really fantastic game, and also like Bonanza.
Yeah,
Bonanza's great. I do like Bonanza quite a bit.
In Puerto Rico, like, he's got so many classics.
Oh, Puerto Rico. That's not Ube.
It's
not Ube.
Who did Puerto Rico?
You can cut that out.
Yeah.
Andreas Seyfarth, I think.
Why did I think Uwe did Puerto Rico?
I don't know.
That's blowing my mind.
That's blowing your mind, really?
Yeah.
Oh man.
That's like completely ingrained in my.
Cut that. You're gonna lose all your credibility if that's in the episode. All right. So where do you want to go after this?
You can just finish it up with Uwe.
Yeah. Okay. So overall, I would say that he's not my favorite. He used to be my favorite designer. He's very good. I do like what he does, and I will continue to watch what he does. I'm excited to. I'm not super optimistic, but I'm excited to see what Ray Colt brings to the table. Because Newsfjord is one of his newer ones, and it's very much a stripped down worker placement, kind of like this, kind of in the vein of what he used to do. It's a little bit different. Feels a lot like Glass Road to me, but I really like Newsfjord. A lot of people didn't, but I really do like it, and I'm excited to see if Ray Colt can kind of maybe he starts making those kind of games again. Maybe it just doesn't need to be. Maybe the boxes don't need to weigh like 13 pounds. You know what I mean?
On the other hand, that's my favorite of his.
And I'm not even gonna. You can totally have that. You could. That's all you. That's all you, David.
Well, Feast is. Caverna, I think, is one of his weaker ones. I will say Newsfield did not look super intriguing, but you've made me want to play it.
I want to play it so bad. I really. It might be. Okay, so it's definitely. I think my 3 favorite from him, and I have not played At the Gates of Loyang, but out of all the games I've played, I think it goes Le Havre number 1, Agricola number 2, and then Newsfield number 3.
I think that's a fair assessment. That's a good list. Mine would probably be Agricola, Feast, and then Patchwork. I think Patchwork is a brilliant game.
Patchwork is really good unless you buy a copy and the pieces don't fit together. That's really, really not fun.
Did you get a counterfeit?
I probably did.
It must be, because I've never even heard of that.
Oh, the pieces just do not fit together at all.
Wow. Well, that's going to do it here for Let Them Eat Cardboard. This was our first episode. Hopefully it turns out okay. And we'll come back next week with some more games. We're going to try to get some stuff played here this evening.
We're going to try to play some stuff for you guys.
What are we going to play? Are we going to play Targi?
Well, I'm definitely down to play Targi.
All right, we'll play Targi.
Let's play some Targi.
Since we got 2. All right, see you guys next week.
Goodbye, guys.
Okay, and a few news items here to go over. First off, there is the Climbers XL edition on Kickstarter. This is from Capstone Games.
Yep.
And it's unfortunately not doing very well on Kickstarter. I don't know if you've noticed.
I actually haven't. I keep meaning to play Climbers, but I don't. I feel like there's been. You went to Gen Con. You saw like XL Sagrada and Tokyo Highway. I feel like the XL trend maybe isn't the best way to go in terms of games on Kickstarter, but I don't know. Maybe it's good.
I think that they kind of overplayed their hand, or maybe overestimated the interest.
Yeah.
And like even the Zool XL edition, they straight up said, we have to have at least 500 orders for this to make sense financially.
Yeah.
And so that's why the funding goal, I think, on this is so high, and why they're having trouble meeting it.
Yeah.
Because production of something this big and heavy is not going to be cheap.
And I need small. Like I want. Can we just start getting smaller boxes? Because I can hold. I'll be able to. I can't buy another shelf. I have 2 Calyxes right now. I cannot buy another one.
Yeah. And the XL thing, it's an interesting, like, there are games where I appreciate it, like Flick 'em Up. The demo version of that at Gen Con a few years back was an XL edition. And
really?
That was great. But
that sounds awesome.
Something like this, I don't think, like the regular edition's already pretty chunky.
It is.
So that's another reason why I don't think it's necessary. And I think that maybe, like I said, they bit off more than they can chew with the production cost of this one.
Well, I really do like what Capstone puts out, so hopefully it won't. I mean, so Kickstarter's pretty risk-free in terms of. I think that's why it's been used so much. It's been utilized by a lot of these publishers. Capstone is making really, really interesting, cool things. So hopefully that it won't be too much of a smudge on the record.
This game's also kind of outside of their wheelhouse.
Yeah, because they've been reprinted. Well, it's part of their like Simply Complex line.
That was the same as the Estates, which was
it was exactly. And they did it like Arkwright. They reprinted that. That was a Spielworks title. They've been putting out a lot. They're going to reprint Irish Gauge, which was a Winsome game by Tom Russell. I'm really excited for that.
What I was getting at there is like Climbers is a lot more just almost pure abstract opposed to their other games, which is kind of an interesting. It's a different type of game from the stuff they normally put out. And like even the Estates, which is lots of wooden components.
Yeah.
That feels more like a traditional board game as opposed to this.
I agree.
And Climbers, I think, is interesting, but I think at the end of the day, I prefer Santorini for a similar type of game. And I don't think that I've played an abstract that works well with more than 2 players. like this one, you can play more than 2.
Yeah.
But I just think abstracts are best at 2. I think I can't think of any that I've enjoyed with more than 2.
I can think of one. That's Dokmas.
I have not.
I'm a huge fan of Dokmas.
Okay, Blockus is pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, I will give it that. Next up is the BattleCon Kickstarter that's going right now.
Tell me about it.
This is like the definitive and final Kickstarter they're doing for BattleCon. That doesn't mean the system is ending. They're going to still put out stuff here and there, but they're not going to be doing Kickstarters anymore.
Okay.
But this is the Ultimate Edition. Basically, you can get everything they've ever put out. Or if you already have everything, you can get like the upgrade for it. And it's like a kind of a rebalancing of the old sets. A giant box to hold everything. Little tuck boxes for each character.
Oh, yeah. You're really excited about those.
Full card sets. I have everything they've put out for it so far. And it's kind of a mess in that box. You've seen it.
Yeah, you showed it to me.
There's like 100 and something baggies
it
of cards.
It gave me anxiety when I looked at it.
So I'm definitely picking up the big box that comes with everything, the updated cards and balance stuff for the characters in the boxes to organize it. But it's going to be like a week and a half of organizing to get everything sorted and put into that box. And then that box will take up a whole shelf there.
I feel for you there, bud. I do.
But if you want to dive in, there's also just the new version or the new set that comes with like 10 new characters, or you can get a mix and match of all the old sets.
I still got to play it.
Yes. So BattleCon is basically a 2D fighting game in card form. Given your Magic and dueling card game background, I think you would really appreciate it. It's a really tight, really, really smart game. Even though it's a card game, there's no randomness. There's no card draw. Sally. Hey, that's not even a dog out there.
That's not even, that's a human.
Be nice. Sally. Put that hair down. Why are you being such a grump?
So you're gone.
Yes, BattleCon is a 2D fighting card game. And given your history playing Magic the Gathering, I think you would really like it. It's completely deterministic. There's no card draw or anything. You know exactly what they have in their hand, and it's all just the mind games and bluffing of what they're going to play. And
love me some mind games.
I think you'll really like it. And there's like 100 characters now, which is completely overwhelming, but
I'm already Jesus.
You just stick to 1 or 2 and you can play it over and over endless times.
I'm definitely down to try it.
Another one that I want to touch on is Keyflow from Richard Brees in the Keyflower series, or the Key series.
The Key series.
Keyflower is one of my favorite games, probably top 3 for me. And this is basically the card version of Keyflower.
Yes.
Which is interesting because all the games previously in this series have been just similar settings, some bleed over in mechanics, but a different take on that setting and that style. Whereas this one is basically a drafting version of Keyflower. Yeah. So each round you will draft one card, and then each player will play that card into their tableau, and then you'll draft the next card. I looked over the rule book. I don't see it being better than Keyflower, and Keyflower is kind of a few pegs higher than the rest of the games in the series. Yeah. Like Keeper, I like, but it's pretty mediocre.
I've only played Keeper out of those, and I almost bought Key to the City of London, but then I was just like, no, let's just keep playing Keyflower, because Keyflower really is like Keeper. I don't think Keeper's a bad game at all by any stretch. I think it's a fine game. I
don't see myself ever picking it over Keyflower.
Yeah,
at any player count.
I feel like Keeper would be good for you if you didn't like how mean Keyflower could be. If you were the kind of person that like maybe you played Keyflower one time and you had a bad experience with it, and you tried it again, you also had a bad experience with it. I don't know, maybe try Keeper and see how that goes. Other than that, I don't see why I would. I got rid of Keeper after like 3 plays, and I'm glad it's with someone now that's going to appreciate it. Not that I didn't appreciate it, but yeah,
it's probably on the chopping block for the next time I do a trade.
Yeah. It's Keyflower. Come on,
but Keyflower is probably my favorite Euro game.
If you're listening to this, play Keyflower right now.
Yeah, at any player count, 2 to 6.
Just get a copy of Keyflower and play it. It's really good.
And the last thing I have to touch on is the Food Chain Magnate expansion announcement.
Ooh, the catch-up mechanism.
So a lot of people do, like we mentioned earlier, they do not like how much of a runaway leader or how decisive food chain magnate can be. And so this one is hinting at maybe there being some catch-up mechanics built in.
Also, ketchup is a condiment.
Or they're just being tongue-in-cheek about it, and it's going to just add more stuff to be mean with.
Who knows?
They did mention coffee and decorations and...
sushi, right?
Sushi, yeah, which is weird in that 50s setting. That I don't think sushi was very popular in that golden age America.
Maybe we're uninformed, but I'd like to see some sushi.
Or maybe it's just Splatter's weird look at American culture in that time, and they're not.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not informed.
Yeah. So I'm absolutely. Also, with this got announced, they're going to reprint Roads and Boats.
Yes, which some people is probably more exciting.
It's big news if you have gotten into Splatters like David and I have, and you play your first Splatter and then you start picking them up. You might have heard the term the Big Five, which is Food Chain Magnate, Indonesia, Antiquity, Great Zimbabwe, and Roads and Boats. And Roads and Boats is also literally like so big, like the box does not fit on a calyx at all. You have to put it it's almost like an old school Monopoly box, but like maybe
way thicker,
like way longer. It's a very awkward thing.
And the game goes for what, 200, and the expansion's 100.
Yes. And the thing I've heard the most common sentiment about Roads and Boats is like it's worth it, but it's just like exhausting. And this is from people that play 18xx.
And this
this is tedious and exhausting.
It comes out to like 1,400 components.
It's a lot. I'm excited about it, and I'm scared. I don't know if I want to buy it, actually. I definitely want to play it. I want to try it.
I'll tell you, I missed out on, I don't know if I told you or not, but I missed out on an auction at Gen Con. It went for $145.
Oh, yeah. That would have, ooh.
And my buddy that was bidding for me, I told him like 130, bid 130. So I missed out on it by $15.
It's probably for the best, though.
But yeah, going back to the food chain expansion, the one thing I really hope for is that it brings in a couple new employees, so that maybe there's a different opener.
That would be very exciting.
Because the game can be static at the beginning with people going either recruiting girl or trainer.
Yeah.
And so if they add in even one more viable opener, that would really change the game up. I always
go recruiting girl or trainer, but I have heard, and this is from people that do play the game more than me, that once in a while you can go errand boy, and errand boy is good.
There's a couple scenarios a waitress strategy can be fun, can be viable, which is really funny because you just mass waitresses.
You just don't,
but they're not really serving anyone, but they're somehow still making money.
Still make a ton of money.
Yeah. So that's all I have. Did you want to touch on the Sierra Madre stuff?
Yes, I do want to touch on one thing. So if you're listening to this now, the PAX Premier 2nd Edition Kickstarter ended. That's another Cole Worley game. He's retooling one of his first games that was released by Sierra Madre, which is Phil Eklund's publishing company. They are known for doing these very, very historic, very dense, heavy games. So the series that you might have heard is they all start with PAX. So there's like PAX Porphyriana and there's PAX Renaissance. So PAX Porphyriana has been considered by a lot of people to be the best one. And it is getting reprinted in a deluxe edition that's going to come to Kickstarter, along with the new PAX game, which is PAX Transhumanity, and the 2nd edition for his science-themed BIOS series, which is all about the origins of life. It's going to be BIOS Genesis, and I'm really excited for those because I like that kind of stuff.
Is Genesis the dice one?
So I'm not sure. I know Megafauna. I know Megafauna, and they does have dice in them, but you don't roll them. They're just used to measure position, latitude and longitude. And that's about it for me. I'm really excited to get those, though. I'm going to throw some more money at Phil Eklund.
Anything else you can think of? I think that's it.
No, I think that's good.